appreciate. When I left here and went to your teacher. By the way, we're all disciples of Buddha, but we're students of our teacher, our senior teacher. So for 16 years, my teacher has been Taiyun Elliston Roshi. In thinking about a talk today, several things crossed my mind, but the most important one is what I'm doing right now, so why don't I talk about it? I am completing the third of 3 ongos and completing my role as Shuso. Now, since everyone may not know what that means, let me explain. Ongo is an intense practice period. Ongo refers to the rainy season in northwest India. So the typhoons would come in, the monsoons would come in. During this period, it was extremely difficult to move. Now imagine before the rains, you had a herd of arhats. You had a crowd, a sangha of people following Sakyamuni Buddha. It could be 500, could be 1,000. Imagine 1,000 people wandering through the forest. It is a logistical problem. So the idea of having to ask for food, you've got to be able to go far afield and bring back. So as the Sangha grew, more and more logistical problems occurred. In the rainy season, we normally say that they went into caves to prevent themselves from stepping on amphibians, because everything rose from the earth and welcomed the rain. So everything that was dependent on water had a good time. The followers of Sakyamuni Buddha also had the issue of logistics. So moving through the mud in the forest was near to impossible. How could you have a Dharma talk if you couldn't hear because of the wind? Caves were available, and then later on, houses were used in villages. Now notice this progression. After that, the next step was, well, why don't we set up a permanent location? So then temples began to appear later on, 100, 200 years after Sakyamuni Buddha's death. So the Ongo periods refer to intense study. So I am an Ongo. Let me explain what I do. And this is mine because each person going through Ongo works out the schedule with their teacher to maximize the use of the teacher's time, maximize the use of the student's time, be available to meet with whomever wishes to meet, which is, by the way, one of the important things. Anybody that wishes to talk to me may do so. The best time to really talk to me is about 1:30 in the morning, because I also sit at midnight. So my sitting schedule is 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and midnight. So I sit either an hour or 90 minutes at each of those times. Now, over 30 days in Ongo, I develop a very different sense of rhythm and time. In the morning, after the 6 o'clock set, I usually meet with my teacher. In this meeting, we have a chance to do 2 things. Just talk, which we call a Dharma discussion, or talk about my practice, those things that are weighing on me in terms of the teachings or the Dharma. I was just pointing out that there's a full schedule outside on the wall if you'd like to look at what that looks like broken down hour by hour. So an Ongo is that 30-day period. I've thought about my Ongos. I've actually written up the first 2. So let me give you the names of each of the 3. The first one is plain. The second one is no rain. And the third one is pain. So I'll explain that. First Ongo, about 17 months ago, I was the only one here in residency. One person was kind of coming and going, which meant that I was pretty much a hermit, sequestered, which meant a great deal of stillness, quiet time. That was easy to absorb. I enjoyed that a great deal. And the coming and going of others was seen as a bit of a respite. But by the third week, I was more anxious to get back to the plain, to the simple. The second one was no rain. It didn't rain that July. It was very hot here. Our building is not really meant to be a tremendously comfortable air-conditioned environment. I remember that also because other things did not happen, which I then had to move from being more of a hermit to being involved in action. So I may have gone from 70% down to 50% silence in the second one. Now the third one. I'm 3 weeks into this Ongo. It's 4 weeks long, so I'll be leaving at the end of the month. So this one is pain. On the 3rd of May, 2 days after I came, I wrenched my right shoulder. So since then, I've been dealing with the pain of the right shoulder. All of you know the scale of 0 to 10, so I'm not going to get into how much pain I have, but the point is, I am not the pain. I am in pain, but I'm not of the pain. So how do you then complete your Ongo when it's simple, it's not raining, and you're in pain? Well, you just do it. You find a way to do it. So Ongo is where you find out even more about yourself, even though you don't want to in the beginning. Nothing to stop you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Sakyamuni sat at the front of the cave to see who was coming and going, and you didn't go by without saying, I'll be right back. So Ongo gives me the opportunity that I can't get out there in everyday life to just settle in, enjoying the bliss and solitude of Zazen. Now let me put that in context of Shuso. Shuso means head student. One becomes a head student after one becomes a black robe or a novice priest. That's my position. I became a novice priest in 2014, so this is my 5th year. The abbot or the teacher asks if you are ready to be Shuso. You don't say, I'm ready to be Shuso. The appropriate answer, of course, would be no, and we actually do that in the ceremony. I'm asked 3 times in the ceremony, will you be the head student? And each time I said, no. But that 3rd time it really got to me and I said, Gasho. What that means is something extremely important. If you look to my left on my Jusri altar, you see my Jusri. Notice my Jusri carries a large sword. When you go to this altar, he is prepared to cut through your delusion. So you do not approach it lightly. So approaching Shuso lightly for me would have been very, very difficult. After working with my teacher for 16 years. So Shuso then has several responsibilities. I have to empty my waste can. I have to do my own dishes. I do clean my shower on occasion. I do all these things that you just did today, for the most part, at varying degrees. Plus, I'm also what's referred to as a binji. A binji is a person who does things that are asked by the abbot, usually with gasho, and you go and do them. This time has been less so than the other 2, simply because of changing conditions and variables. This one, however, has given me the most important thing, more time with sensei, with my teacher. So as Shuso then, I'm required to provide a koan. as my last gift to the Sangha as head student. In the old days, Buddha used to shoo people away after he thought they were ready to move on. So shooing them away, they went someplace else and set up the Dharma. I suspect they didn't go too far, and Buddha probably visited them, but some, as you know, went all the way to China. In the initial thrust, Buddhism was in China before Bodhidharma came, for example. So in doing these things, I'm essentially giving back to the Sangha. A good way of thinking about that is each step you take on your practice path, you become more and more subservient to the Sangha. So new people coming into the Sangha are the most important. Old people like me are the least important, but I'm here to help everybody else help them. So it's a reverse. In some ways, you have more freedom as a newcomer than you do as an abbot, probably a lot more. The difference is you spent more time on the cushion. Hopefully, I have a little bit of wisdom, although that is up for debate, and we move on. Fall down 8, get up 9, we say. So as Shuso, my last gift before I leave is that the koan study itself culminates in what we call Hosen Shiki. That is Dharma combat, where you listen to my interpretation of the koan. Afterwards, you can ask me any question you want, anyone from the audience. The reason for that is this is a public talk. It would be like I was down on the state capitol grounds and giving this talk. Anybody could come and listen to it. Public talk. Public talk then translates into public case, which is the definition of a koan. So that gives you an idea of the progression of the practice path, what Ango means, what Shuso means. I think the rest of it now is just how deeply you would like to go into any of that. So if we could go ahead and have the bell now, so we'll start that 10-minute period for question and answers. All right, the floor is yours. Questions, comments, queries?
Why do this?
I was asked once, why do you sit if you're already enlightened? Why did Buddha sit after he was enlightened? Enlightenment is not the end. It is the practicing that is the process. When I do this, I am able to better understand myself, which means I then can differentiate between kind of the essence of what I'm doing and the ego that's involved. And then I get to work with others. You know the story well that after Buddha got up from the Bodhi tree, he had a conundrum. Do I go and sit someplace by myself and never see anybody else? Or do I put myself out there and provide myself to people that may be helped by my teaching? So this is a way for me to continue to emphasize my practice. So my practice is sitting, but my practice is also working with people in the community. So that's kind of the role. If we were medical doctors, we'd go back for CMEs. We're continually keeping our practice alert and alive. One of the things, meeting new people, because of the generational gap, some of the language I don't know. I even have to change my metaphor sometimes when I start talking about, well, you remember on I Love Lucy, or something like that, and it doesn't work anymore. So you have to keep current.
MASH references don't even work anymore. That's 20 years later.
So there must be a question.
So qualitatively, what did you notice about your practice that led you to wanting to do Ango, being able to do Ango?
I've been doing Ango, I've been doing my practice for 14 years. On our practice path guidelines, It's pretty explicit what you do if you continue to progress in terms of wanting to have more responsibility in maintaining a Sangha. So part of that is to experience everything that everybody else would experience. So my experience of Ango was twofold. One, I followed in the steps of those who came before me. So those who came before me could tell me a little bit about it, and I could tell people who come after me a little bit about it. So it's an experience. But the most important thing is I don't get a chance in my life and my work to take out 90 days, which is what we used to do, but I can do 30, thankfully, because the people at my Sangha take over. So I can go into this deep samadhi, if you like, for 30 days and have an overwhelming experience. I liken it to having an immersion in a language. I go to Chile for 30 days. I immerse myself in the language. I'm never the same after I come back. So it would be similar to that. Is that helpful, or any other question on that regard?
Yeah. I was thinking also more like that's like what was happening while you were doing Ango, or what was your practice like, or what changed for you that made you want to, or be able to do this, like from a practice standpoint, subjectively within yourself.
Well, by the time you've had this much time involved with your teacher, you've done several long-term sessions, retreats, up to 8 days. You maybe do 2 or 3 of those a year. You may do shorter sessions of 3 days. You may do a Zazenkai, which is 1 day. You do Rohatsu, you do Hanamasura, you do Oban. So you have a number of things. But at the same time, one of the things that you don't have a chance to do is to spend 30 days with your teacher. Now, people living in Atlanta have more of that opportunity than I do, living 1,225 miles away. So here I am immersed in this. And that immersion is something one longs for, to have that opportunity. So it was a pulled me into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Earlier you had said the presentation of the cone is giving back to us,
Yes.
the community. What was given to you that you felt the need to give back?
16 years of a good teacher so far. I hope this will be another 16. When we talk about dana, we talk about giving. That's our first paramita. A paramita is a form of wisdom, which we hope we gain from going through the teachings of Buddha, taking the precepts, following the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Steps. But we have to really experience what dana means from within the heart. Giving, to give. So that in itself is a koan. Everything can be a koan. Just as a koan, every koan is a dharma gate. So the terminology comes around and goes around, and you begin to use it in a way, but until you experience it, they are just words. There's another way at looking at giving. That is, we share the dharma. We don't just give it or receive it, but we share it. So when you give someone something, that's it. It's theirs. They do what they wish. You give me something, it's mine. I do what I wish. When we share it, we both have a hold of it. So it's a relational thing. So sharing the Dharma might be called a good relationship. When we are sharing this, hence we get to the concept of equanimity, the 4 immeasurables, equanimity being the last, compassion, loving kindness, joy, and equanimity. So the sharing is a wonderful thing. We all do it. We all know what that means when we are sharing something wonderful with someone. So that's part of it. Any other part of that I missed that you want to follow up on?
No, that was perfect.
Sure. You can have another cookie if you asked a question. Cookies are being handed out. Yes, Dan, I have a question. Yes, go ahead, Dan. I was just wondering to myself, does this get easier? Your practice, does it get easier? Well, one would want to hear the word
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
However, that is not the word. The word is samsara. We live in dukkha. We live in uneasiness. We practice to take whatever comes to us more manageable. So we can't skirt what may come down the road, but we do through our practice know that as hard as that is, we do have practice as a way of getting into our refuge, the refuge of Dharma. We know if we practice with others, we have the opportunity to get in refuge through the Sangha, through sharing concerns and interests and problems with other people. We know if we run into difficulty, we can look back at the difficulties that Sakyamuni had, or Bodhidharma, or anyone else that you want to talk about. So that is how we approach it. Ease, no ease, just keep practicing. Yes,
So then isn't the answer really yes and no at the same time?
it is yes, no. It's not yes, it's not no. It's neither yes nor no.
Just
So what does that mean?
oh, I mean, from my own perspective, you know, I can't really describe why I come back to my practice, why, and even why I come back to this form of practice. It just somehow happens. And so it's really kind of outside of, you know, do I enjoy it or do I not enjoy it? Is it easy? Is it hard? For some reason, I just do it. So that's kind of,
Yeah. Very good response. Yes.
In my experience, both as a practitioner and as a meditation instructor, that the beginning can be of sitting can be very shocking as the contents of your mind are revealed as being so trivial, so not, you know, you're not thinking lofty thoughts. You're thinking about your conflict with this person or your grocery list or what you have to do next week. You know, when you look at your mind, it's like, oh my God, what a mess. And then as you become able to settle with that and have a method of putting boundaries on that, then it becomes boring. And it can be boring for a really, really long time. And and it's a difficult point to learn to appreciate the boredom, not as something you have to wiggle out of, but something my teacher described as cool boredom. So you relate to it as that. It's not an issue. You're bored, so what? You know, so you continue your practice after that. And and then gradually, year after year, if you stick with it and you realize the calm that you receive and the space that it creates in your mind,
Okay.
and the effectiveness of the practice in your outside relationships and in managing the conflicts of your own life.
Yes.
And then it becomes a wonderful thing. It becomes something you seek
That's
and
right.
you want to do at 6 a.m. at
Yeah.
noon, you know, and like that, because it's a great space to go into and you're not fighting with yourself or anymore.
Thank you.
So.
One of the things that we believe, I think, is in fixing things, that everything can be fixed. Another thing we believe is that the essence is just over the next hill. Another thing we believe is that what is taking place is secondary to what I want in the future. All of these things are delusional. When we are bored, we are in boredom, meaning we have entered it. It's a Dharma gate. When we step over the threshold and experience it as boredom, smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it, hear it, it begins to change somewhat. Not only that, but when you say you're in boredom, it's not the same as me being in boredom. Whatever it is that we are experiencing is the now, is the moment. In Zen, that's where we are. We can say, time out, let's go into the past, or we can say, time out, let's speculate about the future, but we do it in the moment. So whatever comes up, whatever we have is what we have, and that's what we work with. That is samara. That is what we do when we are there. We have to continue to work with it. Our responsibility is living through our life. So the great meaning is, great is the meaning of birth and death. Awake, awake each one. Do not waste this life, which we translate in Zen as do not waste this moment, because you don't know when it will be the last. So very good comment, Gasho. Got time for a couple more. I'm looking around the room to see who hasn't asked a question yet.
Oh, I wasn't going to ask one, but I will. My question would be, what is the great question that you're trying to resolve?
I don't know. I don't have a great question that is on the top of my head, burning into my skull. An offering would be that I'm so into the process right now that I don't, the big questions are really the questions that come up in the moment that I have to react to. And it's not to diminish larger overarching questions, but right now, that's not my primary questions. They're smaller questions, in the moment kind of questions. I don't know why, but that's what's going on. Now, underneath that question, is there another one?
Only in the dynamic of mirroring the question back on myself. The idea that all things do lead to a paradox once you start questioning where this is going. And in my mind, there is some degree of intelligence that is spawning every time you go down that path. And it builds and it builds and it builds. I don't know where it will end. I don't know how long it will take. And I guess that's the question that lingers within me.
And the question is?
I guess the absolute worst question would be, is my question, is that right? You know, it's not a question I would think is correct to ask, but yet I find myself asking it.
Well, I think that's a very good question. One brief story is Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist, who now is near the end of his life. There was a story about he would take the children of Plum Village in France out walking in the woods, and he was referred to as grandfather monk. So the story is, a little girl comes up to him and says, grandfather monk, what is the color of this tree? Obviously, looked like that was the question, a very good question. So what is a good answer? What's a good answer to that question? Thich Nhat Hanh said, it's exactly the color that you see. And her response was a big smile. So she asked the question and got the right answer for her. That was the right answer for her. Now notice what's happening here, that relationship we talked about, sharing the ends of the question, that's the only answer he felt he could give, just as the only answer I felt I could give was that. So you now have that you brought back, and hopefully understanding to some degree that all questions are important, even the ones that are hard to ask and may not get an immediate answer, and ones that you may carry for a while. The one that I carry but don't have an overwhelming concern about is my name. The three teachings, all of our Dharma names are koans, are things we study. Why was I given that name? What does that name mean? So it's just living it out moment by moment as best we can.
How are your Lotus Sutra studies going then? What have you gotten from the Lotus Sutra?
The Lotus Sutra is such a central part of all of our sutras: Platform Sutra, Lotus Sutra, Diamond Cutter Sutra, Heart Sutra. I found that I've been reading the Lotus Sutra, but my mind has been more consumed by the koan. So I found myself thinking about the koan as a lotus. For me, the idea of evolving, unfolding in the Lotus Sutra is, I'm in the mud and muck wrestling with this koan. So I accept that. And every once in a while, my nose comes up out of the muck and I sense that there's water there, but then I kind of get into the water a little bit. So I find myself now being able to get above the water and experience a little bit of what's happening with all of that I'm going through. But it's not so much the reading of the Lotus Sutra, it is the Lotus Sutra actually being what I'm doing with the koan. And I did not have any inkling of that when that was the sutra that I identified as what I would be reading or working on throughout this. Again, just one of those turns. The other way of looking at it is that when you are immersed in a koan, your life becomes that koan. It's just like when one is pregnant, the whole universe is pregnant. Everything is pregnant. Everything has to be looked at from that point of view. Or when one is in love, everything is in love. We all have to look at it through that point of view. So it's interesting that I found the Lotus Sutra now being kind of the companion to the koan, and seeing that the Lotus Sutra lives in this koan. So that's kind of where I am with it. Gosh, good question. Last chance. Thank you all. Let's close with our Bodhisattva vows. 3 strikes and a stop, please. Beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them.
Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
May all beings be happy. Basho.
Thank you.